So I'm Michael Strong, founder of Expanse Online, a school where we develop and your child's unique genius. We're for intellectual, creative, and or entrepreneurial students who may not love school, who may in fact hate school. And without further ado, I'll let Kath pick it up.
Hi, I'm Catherine Fraze, founder of 100 Roads, which is a research and development organization for co-learning. So that is working together, typically outside the school system, where I empower families to create the education that they know their children need. And it's based on our model workspace education, which was a 32,000 square foot, like a center for authentic creative self-expression and make very hands-on learning oriented. Yeah, and Matt.
Yes, Matt Barnes, co-founder of The Education Game, and we are a platform that works with parents to help them look at a new way of learning. We believe that normal is broken in school, and so we think weird now is going to win. So we're helping families become weird, helping learners become weird, like thinking for themselves, exploring things that they are curious about, things that are actually quite weird in normal school. So that's what we do. We help parents.
Yes.
Welcome to the Weirdo Club, Dr. Anika Prather.
Thank you. That's probably why we.
So yeah, have we known each other? Is it just 2 years, Anika? It seems like longer, but was it 2 years ago we met?
I think it was 2 years. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're a little over 2 years. I think we're a little over 2 years now.
Yeah, but I love original people. Matt calls them weird. I call them original. I love original people. And one of the things that I feel as if I bonded with, I'm just used to calling you Anika, Dr. Prather. So
please call me Anika. Please do.
Is this combination of, on the one hand, self-directed learning, and on the other hand, Socratic dialogue.
Yes.
And on the one hand, a lot of classical schools are kind of, I would say, a little bit rigid, top-down. A lot of self-directed schools are kind of, I'll play with it, kind of hippie places.
Yeah.
And I love how Anika has kind of combined these. And so before telling us all about your unique experience creating Living Water School, I also want to give you freedom at the end to shamelessly plug donations to the Howard Classics Department. So let's start with Living Water School and just make sure we end on that. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, the Howard University, that's all that's on my mind. Living Water School. Howard is consuming my life right now. But the Living Water School was birthed out of my firstborn child, who I call him a powerful child. Basically, that's a child who, the typical child who doesn't like to sit in their seat, very opinionated, always asking why, just dances to the beat of a different drum. Usually the child who would get a label slapped on them if they were in the public school. Thank goodness he was born to a mom who worked in public and private schools and detected his path very early in the game. So when he finished preschool, I left the school we were working. And that school was a pre-K through 12th grade school. It actually was closing down when we left. And he was in timeout all the time. Now, the teacher was really sweet. And this is not a situation where I want to criticize her, but she just didn't quite know how to handle my precious one. And so he was in timeout a lot, and I would say, well, what did he do? And well, he just wouldn't walk in a line, or when I said to walk straight, he kept touching the wall. It was just, and even now, he's 11 now, he sings, he dances, and he's very highly intelligent. He's engaged in dialogue with Eva Brand at St. John's College in one of her seminars, even though he's 11. And that's how he's always been. So when we left there, and this teacher was very sweet, I was like, oh my goodness, if this teacher is sweet and is putting him in timeout too much, what is going to happen to him if he's someplace else, And her timeout was not, you're a bad child. It was like, okay, Dylan, just sit here for a little bit and think about what you've done, or let's take a break. So it was a little bit, he wasn't traumatized by those timeouts as much, because she was really nice. She actually really loved him a lot. But I knew that would not always be his experience. And so I began to look for a school. I had never thought of starting a school. And I didn't even have it on my dreams to be a principal of a school. I love teaching. I love working with the kids hands-on. And I started looking for schools. The public schools near me definitely weren't going to work. I looked at private schools. I looked at Christian schools, and the Christian schools, I'm gonna just be very honest, were not ideal for an African-American male child who doesn't like to sit down all the time. So I knew that wasn't gonna work. And I was really just had a lot of anxiety about what was gonna happen. Were we gonna homeschool? We couldn't homeschool because the biggest thing is he needs to be in constant interaction with people. Now, some kids do great in isolation. And so I'm really big on parents having choices of what works for their child. But my child needs to be constantly learning about social cues, how to relate to people, how to be considerate of others, how to think before he speaks. And that I found worked for him if he was not just always being told what to do, but living it out. He learns by doing. So I knew that homeschooling would not be good for him. As my husband and I said, when he's in isolation with us too long, he becomes a little strange. So we needed him to just really kind of be in that mix of engaging with people so that could be cultivated. So I was really at a place where there was no place for him, and I did not know what I was going to do. And I came across an ad, just popped across my Facebook page for Fairhaven School in Upper Marlboro. And I always shout them out, even though we don't speak much, but I just find it a wonderful school. And I just saw the kids in the trees and hanging up in the rafters. I didn't even need to see anything else. And I was like, this looks like it would be ideal for him, you know, because he's my child that is not going to sit at his desk. He's going to, like today, he was laying out on the carpet. I caught him at one moment hanging on the stair rail, you know, and someone may be listening to me and saying, well, you need to teach him self-control. Well, I think we spend a lot more time teaching self-control than teaching kids how to be free and finding what that looks like. But I'll get more to that later. And so I visited Fairhaven. Their open house was almost over, but they took me on a tour. They gave me a book called, I think, Like Water, written by McKay. His last name is McKay or Craig or whatever, but I ate it up like within a day or so. I read the whole thing, and I felt like it described what my son needed. I have another son who would do great in a traditional school, but I'll get to him in a minute too, and my daughter as well, but my oldest son. And so I came home and I was like, honey, this is it. This is what Dylan needs. And my husband and I had, long story short, had probably one of our biggest fights over this philosophy of setting our son totally free. My husband is an engineer. Oh. He has a degree in computer engineering and a degree in chemical engineering. So do the math on that one. So me telling him that we're not going to teach him how to read, we're not going to teach him math, he's just going to do whatever he wants and just find himself, did not fly with my beloved. So, one thing I've learned about marriage, this is just a little side note, is compromise is a beautiful thing. So we argued and we talked through it. My husband is my best friend. I love that he lets me express myself and I let him express himself. And through that argument, we created this philosophy where both of us could go, I think I can do this. It's half freedom and half classical education. And so half of the day is in class. Well, we split the week in half. Half of the week they're in classical classes. Then half of the week they have complete freedom. But even the classes have traces of freedom. It's not as rigorous as traditional school. So like today is Monday, every Monday is Socratic seminar, and we use Touchstones, the organization Touchstones, to just have a seminar every Monday where they're discussing, like today we discussed, I think The Cave from Plato's Republic, and I think another group discussed the ethics, part of the ethics. And so we discuss these small texts, and even the little people do it. The little people do Aesop's fables, and the other ones do folk tales from different countries, and it's all leading to a broader worldview. And so we do that on Mondays, and then they have math, and then they have and there's science and history from K to 8th grade. Science and history is all project based. They, at the beginning of the year, they're given a list of topics they can cover because we want to make sure they're covering some of the broad brush topics that the county or the state would want them to have. So for example, if they're doing a history project, they can choose for the year to study government or world or American or US, African American, Native American. We count African American and Native American history as American history. So you can choose to study it through that lens as well. And then, and they pick it, and we order their textbooks based on the topic that they want to cover, and they read through it, and they choose topics that they want to delve into on their own and read about during the week and research it. And then every single Thursday, they do a PowerPoint presentation on their topic. So there's no one lecturing them, but they're engaged in going deep into these topics they've chosen and teaching us what they're learning. So that's history. With science, we do the same thing. So it's not just choose anything. When I first started, it was like choose anything. And they would say, well, I'm doing my science on Pokemon. Pokemon is not science, sweetie. Well, take some type of a science to create him, but you didn't talk about that in your project. So that was the first year, 7 years ago. We learned through trial and error. So now we do the same thing, looking at what the state requires, and we came up with our topics. They can choose to study botany, earth science, astronomy, life sciences, physics, chemistry. All for the curriculum we have has textbooks that are connected, that are written for younger kids, K through 8th, and they take those books home and they do the same thing as the history. They read through the book, they pick a topic of interest, and they teach us through a PowerPoint presentation. In addition to that and this is all independent, the science and the history in those grades, and I'll talk about high school in a minute, they're reading and learning for themselves, and they really get into it. Then they also do an essay connected to the topic they present on. And that's really important because it solidifies. It's not just, oh, I just throw some pictures on and here's what I learned about this. But they have to write an essay, and a rubric is given for how that essay is put together. And then because we're all online for COVID, and we're actually going to stay online, I can talk about that in a little bit, everything is turned into a portfolio. So we can open up the portfolio and I can see what topics they've covered in the year in that subject area. And then math is pretty traditional, but it's taught again in a way where there's dialogue. Do you need my help? Like students who don't need help don't have to sit and listen to a lecture. They can just, like my son doesn't pay any attention to the lecture. He just gets the book and just works through it at his own pace, and he's become very good at math. All three of my kids have. And so, and it's just kind of not, we all have to be on page 1. If you're not on page 1 and still in the other section, then you're somehow not smart. We look at it as everyone has to learn at their own pace, and that needs to be respected. We also have a strong policy of not holding kids back. I always say we're going to put it on the back end. And the reason why I say that is because I was one of those students who did poorly from pre-K through 11th grade. And thank God I had teachers that would pass me by the skin of my teeth. But for whatever reason, my 12th grade year, the light bulb went off and I became like an honor student. I don't know why, but I'm noticing this pattern that when kids are growing up, everyone develops at a different pace, but somewhere close to 18, it just kind of comes together. Every now and then, because you can't graduate from us until you have worked through some things and gotten through certain benchmarks. Every now and then, we've only had 2 that this has happened. No, 1 that this has happened. They stay an extra year, but they usually are ready by that extra year. So they may be late 18, 19, every now and then. But those students usually ask, I'm not ready to graduate next year. Can I stay an extra year? So it's again, them feeling like we don't feel like you're not smart. You can decide what works best for you. And so, so it's really been quite a journey. And so then our high school, when they get to high school, it becomes a little bit more traditional in how we keep track of their grades, because we know that most of them want to go to college and they would need a more traditional transcript, you know what I mean? And so they're taking all the traditional courses, but again, they have a lot of freedom of when they take it, as long as it's not, like for example, they couldn't take Algebra 2 and they haven't had Algebra 1, and they'll understand that, but they can decide to take geometry if they want to, a little out of order, because it's a little bit different, or if they want to do physical science or biology and different so we try to, and we actually consult with each high schooler. What classes do you want to take? And, oh, I think I had that last year. You're right. It's a discussion, not just you're going to do this. And they are in charge of their journey. And so then all of this happens Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays only. And we have breaks scattered throughout each class. So that they can have time to just woosah and just relax. And then Thursday is projects and what we call the Stillwater Cafe, which is a time for them to just meet with staff to, if there's work they feel like they need help in, let me just sit in this quiet space and work. And then Friday, we go nature study. We go hiking every Friday as a group. And those who are out of state go hiking where they are and they send us pictures to show. And that nature study has been really inspired by Cedar Song, the Cedar Song Way, which is a nature study school, a nature school started by, I think her name is Erin Kinney, she passed away, but she created a beautiful program for going out and just learning from nature freely, observing, engaging with it, running around in it, playing in it, and enjoying nature. And we found that to be therapeutic as well. And so we were a brick and mortar school for 5.5 of our years. COVID came and we turned it to an online program, and the kids did a great job of creating an online community. And we thought it was temporary, and we found out this is working. We started enrolling students out of state. We're about to be accredited by Middle States as an online school. And we're really excited about that. Past the candidacy, we've scheduled our school visit, and we have students in New York, Florida, and Texas, and more to come. And the parents like it because, number one, they feel like their children are safe from COVID. That's not quite under control yet, and we don't know when that's going to happen. But they've also noticed the peer pressure, just some other distractions that happen in school aren't there. So right now, and they like that we still get together during the week, where there's still time for them to connect with friends. So our out-of-state families are now introducing their friends in their states to join. So they're forming like pods in their state that hopefully will join our school, and then they can do their own gatherings and hikes in their state. And so we said, okay, well, we'll stay. And we voted to stay on another year. And we're just going to keep reassessing each year. But so far, we feel very comfortable staying on another year. As even everybody else around us has a lot of trepidation about going back in the building and things not quite under control with the virus, but we have a system that is just really consistent and really works. And we place as much emphasis on freedom as we do the academic part that we offer. My husband and I still feel like children, let me just say this though, I still feel like children could learn in the Sudbury model. I am a huge fan of it. But I love my husband more than educational philosophy. So I'm good with the compromise. He's happy. I'm happy. My children are happy. My son told me recently, Mommy, thank you so much for giving me such a free way to learn.
Wow.
And, and he really is developing in a phenomenal way. He reads a lot. He is very good at math. He can engage in really deep intellectual conversation with adults. But he feels unhindered and respected. And so, yeah, so that's, I hope that gave a clear picture of our little school.
Super beautiful. I'll let Kath and Matt have at you.
Okay.
You know, I was, as you're telling the story, I was just laughing. I was actually going through my LinkedIn thread. I sent a note out yesterday about, how our language is all wrong related to education, and how, you know, we call it school, but it's really an ecosystem of learning that, you know, that exists maybe inside of a school building, certainly out in the forest, certainly in the neighbor's house, certainly, you know, at the church or grocery store, right? And so I've gotten to this long, protracted debate with folks who I think are largely kind of coming from the engineering world, where there's a right answer always,
yes,
and one way of doing things.
Yes.
And so really, I want to celebrate your husband because the compromise you made was a lot easier than I'm guessing the compromise that he made. But so I want to get into some of your work a little bit more, because I don't know if you cater to students of color, or is it just kind of open as never?
Yes, we have a large. All of our students are either African American or Hispanic.
Yeah.
We have a Hispanic population. Yep.
So I don't want to get too deep into this, and maybe this is a conversation for the next time you're on. But I just went through. So my uncle's in the hospital, and he had a lot of troubles and tough life. But it caused me to go and look through the generation of his generation of men, and we found a lot of troubled men in that generation, and in my generation, a lot of troubled men in our family. And you know, but years prior to that, people were actually quite stable, quite effective. And what's the link? Do you see there's a link between education, but how we're educating kids, and some of the social dysfunction? And if so, what are your thoughts on that, particularly for Black boys?
Yes. So what I saw, let me tell you a story. I talk in stories, and I hope it's okay to really answer that question. And let me say this too. A lot of times we think about education, and if you hear it, sometimes they'll say it's white educators doing this to Black children, but it's everybody doing it to Black children, especially Black males. Mm. And so I went to, when I was looking for a school for my son, this is when I knew I had to do something radical. I found a really lovely Christian school, Black principal. They had a kindergarten position open, so I was going to apply for that, and then my kids would go to the school, and so I could at least be there. And the principal is taking me on a tour of the school, and a cute little Black boy was walking in line with his class. You know, my son wasn't with me, and all of a sudden he starts dancing, and he touches the wall. And if that woman didn't have a fit, nope, don't you touch that wall. You're gonna make the walls dirty. Right then and there, I said, thank you, ma'am, so much for your time. This is not the place for us, because my son's feet, hands, everything gonna be on that wall. And so where am I going with that? One of the things about our school is, because especially when we were in the building, we try to make it so that, and we think we've got a lot of our students back on this track. When we went home for COVID, it's almost like they thought they couldn't still go outside and do things, you know, but when we were in the building, we had a large amount of African-American males, we still do. Mm-hmm. And they love to play the sports, especially, it was two things, basketball and Manhunt. Have you ever played Manhunt? Manhunt is when they're literally running all over the property, through the woods, through the trees, trying to hunt somebody down, but in basketball. And so our rule was in the building is, here's your checklist of things that are due Thursday or Friday or whenever they're due, but you're free, you know, as long as you get your stuff in on time. That's how we would run this. That's how we run the online program as well. And so, and we allowed gaming as well. And so we found our males, we used to get males from other schools who really were struggling, but when they saw they could be able to go outside and work out this power that God had put in them, to do sports or to run or to act or to dance or to move, which is not a label that we sometimes label that as ADHD, or they don't have self-control or rebellion. You know, my poor son, who's got a heart so tender, it wasn't that he was being rebellious, he really was made to move. And literally, he spends his days just dancing to music that is not on. Like, it's in his head, but he's dancing everywhere. And so what I have found is there seems to be we seem so intent on preparing them for good jobs and being able to fit into this mold that we're not paying attention to how they were created. And I have found that when you really key into how they are created, they find themselves, like following them. I do believe you should be talking about different characters. Like, I'm sorry, sir, you're not allowed to lie. We're not offering you that much freedom. Like, no. But, you know, or stealing or hurting someone. Like, these are things, I feel like more attention needs to be paid to that, like the character issues. But, you know, I always, as a Christian, I always say the Bible does not say thou shalt learn math. You know, it doesn't say that. We want them to learn math because it'll help them be successful, but the anxiety should be over their character more than their academics, because they will find themselves. You know, if their character is what it should be and they are respected as human beings, that's where the focus should be. The academics, especially as they begin to pinpoint, this is what I want to do. Then they become interested. Like my youngest son, let me talk about my youngest son is really interesting. He is obsessed with the weather. We don't know why, but he is. He literally will sit all day and watch documentaries about weather phenomenon, reading about weather phenomenon. So his studies all this year for science is weather and space. And I just found out yesterday that the first thing he does, he gets up, he reads his Bible, and then he goes and sees what the weather is. And I've always wondered, why is it when I'm getting dressed, he tells me what I should wear? Like, why does he know what the weather is? And so recently he said, I'm planning to be a weatherman. I'm going to be a meteorologist. Well, what is that doing? He is studying science without a teacher, you know, or their parents, again, and this is again keying into our Black males, who I find to be the most beautiful, brilliant creatures on the face of the earth. I do. And they're so full of humor and talent and giftedness, and the intellect is just amazing. And so we have parents like, you know, we don't want to have them too much screen time, no gaming. My sons, I'm like, well, just like any adult deserves freedom when they've paid their bills and gone to work and they want to sit down and scroll on their phone because the day at work, my husband, when he comes in from work, the first thing he does is lay down on his little lounge area and cruise social media. That's his downtime. Well, don't children deserve the right that if they've been in school or been doing stuff all day, they deserve the right to just enjoy? So I always tell my kids, your room is clean, your laundry's done, you've taken care of your responsibilities, enjoy that video gaming, I won't disturb you. Well, they have a lot of freedom in gaming, right? But I want to share this with you. We're so afraid of the screen time. Well, they have discovered that a lot of gaming is connected to Japan. Now they're into anime. They're teaching themselves Japanese. Do you follow that path, my friend?
The branching that's unpredictable. Yep.
Yes. And so I didn't realize, and I had nothing to do, I didn't say, well, you know, let's get you in a STEM program. And I'm not against STEM, so please don't think that, because we have STEM at the school as well. Kids can freely sign up for it if they want to take it. We have an engineer who comes in and does a great job, but they don't have to. My sons love it. But that's STEM. And where did that STEM come from? Right? Or my daughter, she's into gaming. She's only 7. This child knows more about the computer than I do. She said, Mom, come sit next to my computer. Let's take a picture together. So I'm sitting there next to her. She sets up the computer, sets up the camera, and she says, smile. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did you learn to take a picture of me on your computer? And she's 7. But so I feel like when we are so obsessed with not too much gaming, I do think there should be some self-control, but I think we obsess about it a little too much. We could be hindering some future computer engineers, I have a cousin whose son is making so much money in the NBA gaming community. Like, he's like a superstar in the NBA gaming community. You know, so we're hindering their passions. My daughter is an artist. She draws really well. And this is, again, you find a lot of, especially people of color are really artsy, creative. It's something that seems to be a part of us. And she was into drawing and painting. Well, now she's doing it on the computer. She's taught herself how to do graphics on the computer. And so this is, again, that freedom. We're so afraid of children following their passion. And I feel like, I guess probably one of the parts where the Sudbury model and I may separate a little bit is that I feel like the adult, the parent, the teacher, is there like St. John's College would say, like a tutor, a guide, a support system.
A coach.
Yeah, a coach. I always say, I'm just there to make sure you don't bump your head. Like, that's, you know, they're just there enjoying their space and their time. So, and so going back to working with the African-American community and why I think my parents love it is I feel like their children are allowed, they don't have to fit this framework of assimilation. They can come to school in their dreads and afros, jeans and tennis shoes. They can pursue their interests. We have a student now who is in college who, when he was with us, he spent his time wanting to make beats, and he would come, share his music. I told him, your music is the only one I listen to with cursing in it. And I know people are like, oh my gosh, that's harmful. but you know, he's not the same religion I am. His parents gave him that space. And so, but what happened by me giving him that space? And I told him, I'm gonna need you to make me the clean version eventually. But what am I going with that? And I hope people aren't gonna be offended that I said that or think I'm lowering a standard. If I had spent so much time saying, you shouldn't be doing that, like he could not discover his gifting, right? He needed to find himself. So what is he doing now? He's in college for music production now, you know? Or I have another student who she did the few things we had her to do academically, part of me and my husband's agreement and compromise. But her other free time was used, she was doing hair and sewing, right? She opened her own hair salon. We have another student who's 13 years old. Her free time was used baking, and she would sell her baked goods at the school. Well, now she has her own bakery and she sells baked goods every weekend at the farmer's market, and she's only 13. So those are just examples of what freedom gives our children in our homes, in our schools. They just need time to think. They need time to embrace who they are so they can figure out how to reach what they want to be.
You know, I couldn't agree.
But I mean, develop your own genius. But go ahead, Kath. It was so perfect.
You're speaking my language, and my heart is just like, yes, yes. And what I really, really love about what you're doing and your choice of having sort of something in the middle is that, you know, in my travels in the self-directed learning world, I mean, the diversity is just so great because we haven't been molding these children to be a product.
Yes, yes.
Right. And so, you know, you have one child in the family that really needs complete freedom.
Yes.
Another one that really wants the most rigorous traditional thing possible. Yeah. Right? And he's like, how did I birth these two? Yeah. Anyway, you've got the possibility of everything in your system. Yes. And I think that makes it really powerful because, you know, those kids who are really self-directed, watching the other ones, and they're all watching each other, right? And they learn so much by being in community, and you've combined all those things.
Yes,
you really are so non-judgmental.
Yes,
right? You have such a deep belief in the possibilities of each individual child, and you know, I just see that adults around children who are really listening, bring out the best in everybody around them, and I just, you know, I'm just so excited about what you're doing, and I just hope everyone who's listening.
And we underestimate freedom. We underestimate, like, we really feel like the educational system that we live under. Now, I want to be careful because if you notice, if you follow me, I'm very careful about talking bad about the public school system as if it's this horrible space. Number one, I have too many friends who are phenomenal teachers in the education system, and I want to honor their work. But I do want to say we put too much faith in that. Maybe that's your path. You know, we do have a country, we have to educate every child. Every child has to go to school someplace. So these schools are important for us. But those of us who can make some choices, we cannot allow ourselves to be trapped thinking that if our children are not following the same path as a traditional system, that somehow they're missing out. And I want to share a personal example. My son, who's 11, who now reads everything, you know, like, and I don't know why he loves CNN, but he loves to watch CNN even, like really high level thinking. Well, this is the same child who's like, I'm never going to read, never. I'm going to learn everything on the TV. That was my son at 6 and 7 years old. Now I go in, because I tend to be a night owl, and he's up reading at like 1 o'clock in the morning, big, thick books. And I'm running out of books for him to read. I have to keep replenishing the family library. But my daughter, who is this phenomenal artsy, we call her the fairy. She just flutters everywhere. She doesn't like reading. And I was all concerned, of course, you know, and she's over 7. Her reading is coming along slow, but it's progressing. And I was worried. But then her math program has 12 books in it. So you work through these different workbooks till you finish first grade or second grade math. I went into her little file and she finished up to book 12, like before Christmas. And my husband was like, babe, how does she know how to subtract? I don't know how she learned how to subtract. Like, so what we're seeing in her is she's very much has an engineering mathematical mind. And reading is just like, oh, do I have to sound out the words? Like, it's really about, it takes too long. Can I just put 2 + 2 is 4? Like, why do I got to do all that? And but the beauty of the school is no one is saying, you haven't learned how to read yet? Like, no one is saying that to her. You can't read better than that. And she is reading now, but it's a very slow process. And we just, you know, sometimes I'm reading in the bed with her. It's not like sit at this desk and listen to these phonics tapes. No pressure. And I have a rule, and I've given this to some of my girlfriends and everyone's just listening to me, and it really works. I did this for potty training, tying shoes, learning to read, learning your math facts. My rule is you got to have your life together by the time you're 30. I'm here for you until you're 30. Someone said, well, why not 18? I said, do you know how many crazy young people I've seen at 18 who go to college who still don't have the maturity to be away at college? They're not ready at 18. Some people are not ready at 18. 30 years old. You have 30 years old to be potty trained. Shoes tied. I'm here for you until you're 30. I'm not kidding. And this mom was like, oh my gosh, I feel so free just by you saying that. I'm like, you're their parent. You can be there for them till they're 30. I mean, I know society says it's different, but just a child knowing that I have that support system while I try to figure my life out actually frees them up to progress pretty quickly. Let me prove to you why. So if I say to my children, you have until you're 30 to be potty trained. If you want to keep pooping on yourself as a teenager, you go ahead and look crazy. And I'm just, all of them were potty trained by 3.
Sure.
Why? Why is it? There was no, I've seen parents spank their kids, you know, because they wet the bed or they have an accident. Why would you do that? Like, well, first of all, you're teaching them just the fear of spanking or some punishment instead of teaching them to listen to their body. And it's the same philosophy for school. If they're living in fear, I'm gonna get in trouble because I didn't do this just right at the right time, they're not learning to listen to their minds and how they learn for themselves so they can design their learning path so they can be successful. They're just doing everything based on fear. And we don't want children to do life based on fear. And so going back to the potty training thing, we just would have conversations. Do you feel something in your stomach? Or like, this is what it feels like when you have to use the bathroom. And I'm not to, I know this might be TMI. Come see mommy use the bathroom. Come see dad. Like this is how it works. And this is whole dialogue, Socratic dialogue around use the bathroom. And what happened was all 3 of my children were potty trained by 3 for everything at night and during the day. So it wasn't like, because sometimes people do the potty training. Well, now let me train them how to not with the bathroom at night. Because why? They have learned to be in tune with their inner self. That's what freedom, that's why this freedom with learning is so important, because they learn to listen. Wait a minute, my stomach's feeling kind of funny. I'm not worried about getting a spanking because I have no fear, so I can be at peace, I'm relaxed, I can hear my body. I can hear my body in my sleep. And I used to love hearing my little ones at 3 years old getting up to go and use the bathroom. It was like, so they're good. And so that is the way with everything, with reading, with doing math. My son, one more example, so you can just see what this looks like, this freedom looks like. Tying shoes. I did not teach any of my children how to tie their shoes. I'm like, you want to get those shoes? Show me you know how to tie a shoe. I am not paying any money and I got to keep stopping to tie your shoe. You will wear Velcro until you get this thing figured out. So one day, they just, there's no commandment that says children have to learn how to tie their shoe by the time they're 3 and 4. There's no Bible commandment, no law in the Constitution. Wear Velcro. You got cute Velcro shoes. But then what happens? I don't want to wear these Velcro. I look crazy. Like, I want to wear the Jordans. I want to wear these shoes with the high tops and the tie. And I want to do that. So next thing you know, they sit over in the corner trying to learn how to tie their shoe. And they may ask me, can you show me one more time? And it's theirs.
Right.
Right. And so there's this self-motivation, which is really big in the Sudbury community, this self-motivation, this self-reliance that forms by giving them that freedom.
Michael, I'm not sure if you had a question, but could I push back on that? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
And I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here. So, because again, I work with a lot of parents, and I can hear what they're gonna say.
Oh yeah.
From this conversation, right? One is, a practical one is I can't afford to have my son or my daughter here until they're 30, right? So that's a practical one. Or I don't want them here until they're 30. But the second one though is, are we letting our children become feral, right? Are we letting our children just kind of roam? But I know it's not what you're saying. So fill the gaps around how do you put limits and structure around that? Yes, tying your shoe, they're going to figure it out, right? reading, I can imagine someone being much more nervous about my 5-year-old or my 8-year-old not reading. When do I start to put the screws to that child? And by the way, you're talking to a recovering tiger mom. I'm recovering from that. But help us. Like, what would you say to a parent who's saying, "Hey, my 8-year-old's not reading. We got to get on the stick. What do we do?" Right? What's your response?
So it's a faith walk. There's a book by one of the creators of Sudbury Valley. Is it something about, about trusting the child? Oh gosh, I can't remember what it is. So let me say this, and then I'm gonna answer your question in 2 ways. I'm gonna talk practically, or as far as framework guidance, but I'm gonna also talk more theoretically first.
Okay.
If you think about eagles and the mother eagle and their baby eagle, if that baby eagle spends enough time, watch this, with the mother eagle, seeing what she's doing, or daddy eagle is doing, they're gonna be like, oh, okay, I want to try to do that. I want to try to fly. And they end up flying. Peter Gray is a psychologist, and he had an article, because I think his son went to a Sudbury school, and he says,
love Peter Gray.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love him so much. So if you have an environment, now this is really key, and then this is where I'm going to get into the practical, Matt. If you have an environment that is stimulating, and your parents are an example, the chances of your child learning freely to actually become what they should be in a timely manner, in a way that makes us all proud, without you putting, I want you to be a doctor or a lawyer, but they're watching. It's the I don't know if anybody reads Martin Heidegger, but he has this essay called What Calls for Thinking, I think it's called. And he breaks down how we just naturally think, like our eyes, our senses take in things, and we're drawn to that, and we want to do that. And so children who are free, typically, if we can have enough faith. Now, when parents say, that didn't work for me, well, you can't say it didn't work for you until your child is 18 and they're still a bum at home. And so they're like, but I got to wait till then. But I have not seen yet testimonies of parents who trusted this freedom process and trusted it all the way through, who have that story to tell. What you do have is entrepreneurs, self-start. That's why Elon Musk is really interesting in his views on education. Hello?
Yes. So let me interrupt real quick, because you're right. You don't see the kid that grows up in that freedom model getting to high school or getting to 18, 20 years old and laying on the couch.
Right.
But what you do see, and I see this all the time with parents, is the 18, 19, 20-year-old who's been in this kind of pressure cooker environment that now all they do is play video games. That's all they do. They can't, they don't have the internal structure to actually lead themselves. I see that a ton. That's back to this question about Black boys that I've been talking about. That's what I'm actually seeing more of. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, because and to that, and a lot of these Black males, a lot of times you'll have the single mom. She's working hard. She wants so much for her son to not end up like their father. Right. So there's this fear, like a lot of her, and I hope I'm not offending and people don't think I'm stereotyping, but I'm just saying that this is what I've seen in my many years in education, public and private schools, is moms parenting out of fear. I don't want you to be like your father.
That was me. That was me. Not about the father, but
yes. And they're yelling at them, and they're, and everything is like almost when they look at that son, that beautiful male, king is what I call them. When they come in, hey, handsome, how you doing? So they're looking, all they can do is see their dad who doesn't show up, who doesn't pay child support, who's not working, who's out on the street. And I don't want you to be like that. I don't want you to be like the way my father was. So there's a lot of fear. Yep. They don't realize that by parenting out of fear, they're allowing their worst fears to come to be.
Wow.
What happens is, and I see this again, actually, just before this, I was on a phone call with a beautiful, I call him my fourth child, son of a beautiful single mom who is, because he has all these people in his ear, I guess myself included, son, you're about to be 18, you want to play, you want to do this, you want to do that. But what it does is it makes them shut down. They can't think. And so what I do, and this is going to surprise you, is when I get males like that around these teenage years, I pull back. I'm like, you know what? I'm here for you if you need me, but I'm going to have to let you fail. Because I made the mistake before I came to the Sudbury model, I was one of those principals who was hand-holding kids all the way through high school, helping them fill out their college things, applications, getting them into college. And you had this percentage of some doing well and some flunking out. And I was trying to look at what was it? And when I would reflect on it, I was like, they never learned or demonstrated they had learned how to fly on their own. Because I was always there to tell them, you need to do this, don't forget this deadline, do that. So right. If they haven't gotten to that place, and I find myself being too hands-on, and I try to talk to the mom, let's back off. They've got to fail. They may have to stay back a year, or they need to feel the pain of failing, because in that will come some self-motivation.
I would add, one of the things you give them, which I think is brilliant, a place where they can fail and still be validated, yes. Rewarded, yes. Supported. Yes. And so I think one of the problems with the school system is failure feels like failure. I love your story about some kids are not ready to graduate at 18, and no big deal. Stay another year, you're welcome. Yes. So I think critical to what you're doing is giving young people the opportunity to fail, but also then being right there to support them, and it's okay. And failure is part of life.
Yep. And that goes back to my philosophy of you have until you're 30. And I came up with, it used to be 18, you have until you're 18. But then I realized, wait a minute, I know some 18-year-olds that just do some crazy stuff. So they're not ready at 18 either. So I said 30. You know what? My mom and dad were there for me until I figured out, where my path was. I was 35 before I got married and moved out. And they were such a support to me. And I said, there's nothing wrong with saying, actually, that takes a lot of pressure. I can figure this out. Mom and dad are there for me. But a lot of moms, especially single moms, girl, when he 18, he got to go. He ain't staying here. He got to have a job or be in college somewhere. Can you imagine the pressure? And you're 18 and you know within yourself you're not ready for that responsibility yet. But if you had son, child, baby girl, I'm here for you at least until you're 30. Most people have it figured out by that time, well before that time. And I think a lot of times another reason why people are resistant to what I'm talking about is, and let's just be real about it, because I was there. What will people say? We're so worried about, when my firstborn son was coming up, he showed signs at around 3 that he could read and write pretty early. He was just picking up pretty quick. And there was this pressure. Everyone's child is learning to read at 3, yes. And you feel this pressure. Like literally, there is nothing that says a child should know how to read when they're 3. Matter of fact, Charlotte Mason says, don't even start until they're 7. And I have found to be true. Most children learn how to read and read well by the time they're 7.
This is why Matt likes to talk about, we're all up with the weirdos, but I'm trying to flip it around and say, no, the normal thing is to love and care for your children and give them the freedom and support like this. And all those people who are stuck in the system are weirdos. So you kind of have to flip the narrative and say, you poor weirdos out there still, going through that system. Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, Matt, they're not learning just how to solve their problems. These are things we should be assessing as parents, as educators, not how well they did on a standardized test, but how well can they learn? One thing I'm learning with my teaching my daughter, which is a really important skill, is that young girls can be messy. I'm just sorry. All of us who've been teachers on the playground know that little girls start to gossip. Don't play with her. We do that, right? And so I'm teaching my daughter, there's no need to break down and cry about it. No need to feel lonely about it. You're a beautiful queen. How do you handle it when some girls don't want to play with you sometimes? Guys are different when this relational thing. And, and she's learning it. She's learning not to get all worked up and depressed, because I used to get depressed as a child, when little girls didn't like me sometimes. But the focus is so much, you gotta get through school. No one, and my parents didn't know that you can focus on emphasizing how children develop emotionally, how to develop emotional strength when people don't like you, when you don't feel like you're fitting in. How do you feel comfortable with that? How do you affirm your child so they can know they're a king or a queen, and whatever you're wearing, it looks the bomb no matter what anybody says about how you look, and being confident in that. Those, I mean, because if you could, can you imagine if someone who's really good at math and reading and they have all of these scores, but have this deep insecurity because they feel unliked, because no one taught them how to be yourself no matter what anybody feels about you. And what happens is they could be intelligent in all these other areas. Because of this emotional weakness here, they can't even, it's hard for them to even achieve greatness in these academic areas because of the depression, the insecurity. But if you deal with all of those things and buck up those even more, then how much easier the mind is clear and they can just, you know, do well in other areas.
These are such fabulous rants. You know, I'm thinking, we need Anika on national television. You need to be shouting this out to the world. Hallelujah.
Well, but the paradigm of school is so strong.
Yes.
And yes, you could shout this from the rooftops, but a large percentage would say you're out to lunch.
Yes.
And you know, it can't be wrong if all these kids are doing it every year, right?
Yes.
But they don't see the outcomes. They don't
Right.
see what happens when that kid is 14 and hates learning, or will never pick up a book again in their life.
Yes.
Which again, I see that with some regularity. So
yes. And a lot of that anxiety about reading is because of how, like when I mean, when I first started, I had a student, he came to me, I guess, 6th grade, and he couldn't read. He was afraid to tell me he could not read. 6th grade, he couldn't read. And he just would play around, just anything to distract from me having to read. And one day I was like, what is going on? You know, that's the freedom I love, is because you can ask, what's wrong? Are you okay? Like, why are you acting like this? Instead of go to the principal's office, or, you know, you're suspended. And he just was like, I can't read. I can't read. And I'm embarrassed that I can't read, and I'm 12. And I said, how can I help you? This is a conversation we're having in a free environment. He said, I just want to be taught how to read privately. So for a whole year, I taught him how to read privately in my office. And the next year he was able to read. The skills were there, just no one had really cultivated it. So it wasn't like I was starting from scratch. He just needed someone to just take that time. It wasn't about you're failing or you're not going to 7th grade. It was just, grades were not even on the table. It's just like, I just need your time. Now he's great. He's very literate. Or I had a Hispanic student who was the only English speaking student in his household. And he walked into my school off the street. He was 12 at the time. And he says, can you teach me? Now he went to the public school up the street from our school. And I was like, what? He said, I can't read. I can't spell my name. Will you teach me? And I said, sure. He said, but I don't have a lot of money. My parents, you know, his parents were immigrants. They didn't speak English. And I said, I mean, like, how do you turn someone away like that? So my husband says, babe, you got to stop taking all these free students. I said, how do you turn someone away? You know?
Right.
And so I said, well, just tell me what your parents can pay. And the mom talked me through an interpreter. She was able to pay something. And I'm like, it doesn't even matter. And the most beautiful thing happened. I didn't make him read out loud to me, because I think one of the biggest mistakes is when we make kids who don't read well read in front of the class. It is destructive to a child's self-worth. And I never made him do it. I just would continue to, me and other teachers would work with him privately. And so it's a Christian school, so we do morning Bible reading in the morning. And so one day this year, I said, I knew he was progressing, but I still didn't want to put that pressure that he had to read in front of everyone. So I said, who wants to read for this morning? He says, I want to read. I said, who said that? Like, I'm on the screen like, wait a minute, that like totally sounds like Tony. Who said that? Me, Miss Anika. You want to read like in public in front of everyone? You know, and I was really nervous, you know, because I didn't want him to feel embarrassed, but I felt like, well, if he's volunteering, he must feel ready. OMG, like he read that so beautifully. I should send you the video, Michael. I took a video. I was crying. I was like, oh my God, you're reading. You're awesome. You know, and he's doing well in all of his math classes, but he came to me, was like on a 2nd grade level on everything. But we took away grades. We took away you're failing. It was just, we're just working with you, getting these basic skills, no pressure. You're great. You're awesome. And this confidence began to develop in him. When he came to us, he was being